Hello everyone, welcome to the story. Today, we will enter a story full of mystery and horror. If you love thrilling ghost stories, don't forget to click like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest stories. Now, prepare yourself, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and enter the world of mysteries. Part 1, Invitation from the Past. John, a young photographer, is always hungry for different scenes. After many years of working in the bustling city, he felt tired of the noisy and bustling streets. He wants to go to quiet places, old houses, relics of the past, places where he can tell his own story through the camera lens. One day, while chatting with a friend, he heard a story about an abandoned old house, located in the suburbs, where no one visited. This house existed decades ago, and now it seems to be just a relic of the past, with cracked walls and broken windows. He decided to drive out to explore that house, bringing his DSLR camera, a flashlight, and curiosity. When approaching the house, the surrounding space becomes strange and quiet. It feels like this house has been isolated from the outside world for a long time. It was dark, and darkness covered the deserted dirt roads. The house stood quietly among the overgrown trees, as if waiting for someone to find out its secret. John entered the house through a broken window. The wooden planks on the floor creaked under his every step. The musty smell was strong. The air seemed frozen in time. He felt like he was entering a long-forgotten place. A strange feeling began to appear, but John told himself it was just his imagination. He was used to mysterious scenes like this, and all he needed to do was find a few unique photos. He began moving through the rooms, his flashlight illuminating every dark corner. Old objects, faded paintings hanging on the walls, broken windows, all created a strange space that he had never seen before. John felt excited when he found these sights, things he had never photographed. However, as he went deeper into the house, an uneasy feeling appeared. Strange, gentle noises rang out from somewhere in the darkness. A creaking chair, a rattling door, made him feel like something was wrong. John told himself these were normal noises in an old house, but the tension couldn't go away. As he moved through the long hallway, the flashlight shined through a large mirror, and John saw his image. But suddenly, he noticed a faint figure behind him in the mirror. When he turned around, there was no one there, just an empty room. John told himself it was just the flashlight's light, but the strange feeling still didn't go away. John continued to move to the second floor of the house. The stairs creaked under every step. When he opened the door to an old room, a cold wind blew through, making him shiver. The feeling that someone was standing behind him became increasingly clear. He turned around, but saw no one. The second floor of the house seems to be a long-neglected space. Old beds, rotting wardrobes, broken mirrors, all were scattered everywhere. John took some more photos. When he looked at the camera screen, he saw his image reflected in the broken mirror, but this time it wasn't just him. A faint figure stood in the corner of the room, near the door. John felt its presence, although he couldn't see it clearly. His heart pounded in his chest. He turned around, but saw nothing. However, the feeling of someone standing there did not leave him. The silhouettes in the mirror are no longer blurred. They were clearer, as if they were watching him from the shadows. John felt an invisible force pulling him closer, and soft footsteps echoed around him. He couldn't move, couldn't run away, but he felt that he couldn't stand still. This feeling becomes more and more obvious. Shadows kept wandering in the mirror, and a strange figure began to approach him. John couldn't run away, feeling like he was trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Every step he took made the space more oppressive, as if the house was swallowing him whole. Finally, John decided to leave the house. He rushed out of the room, trying to open the door, but everything seemed to be locked. It felt like the house didn't want him to leave, as if it was holding him back to solve an undiscovered secret. After a futile struggle, he walked out, but the figures in the mirror still did not let go. When he got home, he opened the computer and looked back at the photos he had taken. The strange thing is, those figures still appear in every photo, as if they had followed him out of the house. John couldn't escape the feeling like he was being watched. Strange images still haunt him every night, and no matter how hard he tries, the feeling of fear cannot go away. After returning home, John felt like he couldn't escape the strange figures he encountered in the abandoned house. Every night, when he closed his eyes, images of faint figures appeared in his mind. Strange sounds from the house, the shivers when looking in the mirror, it all kept going round and round in his head. But that was just the beginning of a chain of events can't explain. One day, while sorting through photos from the trip, John suddenly noticed something unusual in some of the photos he had taken in the house. In one particular photo, when looking into a broken mirror, the reflection is not only him but also a faint shape standing behind him. At first, he thought it was just an illusion caused by light or dust. But when he zoomed in on the photo, he realized that the shape could be a person, although the face was unclear. A strange feeling arose within him. He couldn't shake the feeling like something was watching him. He went back to look at all the photos, but they all contained these strange figures. Images appear in mirrors, in hidden corners of rooms, and even in photographs of old objects. John decided to return to the house to find out more. He couldn't stop, couldn't let go of that feeling, as if there was a part of him still trapped there, in that old house. John returned to the house one dark day. This time, he didn't come alone. He brought along a close friend, David, an expert on history and supernatural phenomena. He wants someone to witness strange events and find out why this house contains unexplained secrets. As the two approached the house, the surrounding atmosphere became gloomy and stuffy. Dense trees, deserted dirt roads, all create a space completely separate from the outside world. John and David entered through the broken window, and this time, there wasn't any of the same suspense as the first time. The strange feeling had become a part of him, like something familiar and waiting for him to discover. When they entered, the space inside was still the same, dark and dusty. The old walls and rotten wooden planks still lie dormant, waiting. But this time, John felt something different. Shadows, reflections, all appear more clearly than ever. They continued through the rooms, but this time David began to have the same strange feeling that John had experienced. They went to the room on the second floor, where there was the large mirror that John had seen last time. John raised his camera and began taking pictures of the mirror again, while David rummaged through the surrounding objects. When John's camera took a picture of the mirror this time, something strange happened. In the photo, there was not only their image, but also a faint figure standing in the corner of the room, as if staring at them. It felt like someone from another world was watching their every move. "David, look!" John exclaimed. "You see this too, right?" David looked at the camera screen and also felt cold. "We need to get out of here now." But John couldn't stop. He felt like something wanted them to stay, to discover the final secret of this house. Why do those shapes appear in the mirror? Are those silhouette souls trapped in this house? Or maybe they are the memories of people who lived here before. The strange, inexplicable feeling became stronger and stronger, making John unable to deny the fact that this house was not a normal place. David, who was very alert, began searching for traces of the house's history. He found an old notebook in a corner of the room, where the history of the house was recorded. This notebook is about the house's former residents, who mysteriously disappeared many years ago. Some people believe that this house is cursed, and the souls of those who have lived here have yet to escape. Meanwhile, John continued to explore the room where he felt a strange presence. As he moved through a dark hallway, a soft noise rang out from behind. He turned around and saw the silhouette of a man standing in the dark, with eyes that could not be seen clearly, but he felt the stare. John couldn't understand why there was that presence in this house. David reread a passage from the notebook, and one sentence made him stop. "They are waiting in the dark, and just when you see them, they won't let you go." The truth gradually becomes clear. This house is not just an abandoned place. It is a portal, an entrance to another world, where trapped souls seek escape. John and David realized that they had accidentally opened that door by entering this house. As they continued to explore, they realized that each room in the house has its own story, an unsolved secret. A room filled with old objects, including an antique clock with the corroded traces of time. This watch seems to be an important part of the story, as it no longer runs. But the strange thing was that when they stood near the clock, they heard the ticking sound of the clock hands, as if it was counting down the time. At this moment, both John and David realized that this house not only contained strange apparitions, but was also a place where old memories of the deceased still existed. Every room, every painting, every mirror reflects secrets they cannot avoid. When they finally found a secret door in the basement, an inexplicable feeling arose. The door opened, and they entered another space, a dark world, full of shadowy figures, whispering sounds and repetitive clapping. John realized that he was no longer in this house but had entered another dimension. Those figures are not trapped souls, but part of another world, where memories and ghosts can never be released. And the biggest question remains unanswered. Can they escape this place and return to the real world, or will they forever be a part of this strange house? John and David stood in the dark space, feeling like they had crossed a line of no return. They could no longer see the house, no longer see the rotten walls. Only darkness and an unknown space surrounded them. The repetitive clapping still rang out, gentle but powerful, both a welcome and a warning. "David," John called softly, his voice lost in the silence. "Do you feel it? We're not in the house anymore, right?" David did not respond immediately. He looked around, his eyes wide in confusion. They have entered another dimension, a place between the real world and the invisible realms. All they could hear were the sounds of applause growing closer, seemingly coming from the shadowy figures around them. "This is not a hallucination," David whispered. "This is a trap, a place where trapped souls can't leave, a place where we can't escape either." John looked around, and then he noticed something strange in this space. The paintings, walls, and objects in the old house that they had seen all appeared in this space, but they were living objects, as if they were observing them, waiting for them to make the final decision. The feeling of uneasiness became stronger as one of the figures in the space stepped closer. It emerged from the darkness, a faint shape, vaguely resembling a person, but not a person. This figure may be a spirit, a presence, but it does not want to harm them. Instead, it stood there, looking at them, waiting for an answer. John tried to move, but it was as if this space had trapped them. The shadow looked at them, then gently said, "Only if you accept the truth can you escape this place." Neither John nor David immediately understood that statement. What truth to accept? What does it mean to escape this place? Have they gotten lost in a strange dimension where there is no way out, or where they are forced to face the house's unsolved secrets? It feels like they are caught in a vortex with no way out. Every step is like a long, never-ending journey. Strange sounds and shadowy shapes kept wandering around, making them even more confused. But then a truth appeared, right in the whispers in the wind, in mysterious shapes. This house, a voice rang out in the dim space, is not just a dwelling place for souls. It is a door, a passage between worlds. Those who come here, like you, will never leave unless you discover its secrets. John looked at David, and they both noticed something strange. Their feeling is not a stray, but part of a game, an inescapable challenge. Both of them are caught up in a story that is not of their own making. They are forced to face themselves with what they are looking for in this house. The figures in the mirror are not just souls. They are unexplored parts of themselves, memories, forgotten feelings, things that cannot be explained. "We can't hide anymore," John said, his voice steady. "If we want to escape this place, we must face what happened in this house. We must understand why these souls remain trapped and how to free them." David nodded. "What is it that makes this house cursed? Is it the haunting of those who have lived here? Or is it some event in the past that has made this place a portal between worlds?" The two began walking through the house again, this time without fear, but instead with a feeling of needing to resolve unanswered questions. They found a hidden room where an old desk contained notebooks and notes, all recording the history of the house. One of the notebooks contains strange notes about an ancient ritual, one that can break the curse and free trapped souls. The notebook says that at some point, a family lived in this house. They found a secret door leading to another dimension where souls cannot escape. Therefore, these souls were trapped in the loop of the house, unable to leave. As they read through the records, they realized that there is only one way to free the house from this haunting, that is to break the door between the worlds, stop the loop and let the souls escape. Finally, they find an antique mirror similar to the one John first saw. It is a mirror that connects worlds. They realize that only if they face the truth about the house, only if they are willing to face the trapped souls, can they break the curse. The two stood in front of the mirror, looking at their own reflection, but this time, the image wasn't just theirs. It is of the trapped souls, the memories of those who have lived in this house. John and David must confront the nature of their obsession, confronting the shadow parts within themselves. When they touched the mirror, a powerful wave of light surrounded them. Every part of the house's memories, every silhouette, every sound of applause all disappeared. The souls were freed, and the house gradually disappeared into obscurity. John and David left the house feeling like they were back in the real world, but they could never forget what they had experienced. Blurred images in the mirror, haunting figures, and unanswered questions still haunt them. After John and David escaped the house, it seemed that the strange show was over, but in reality, it had just begun. The old house, although free of haunting spirits, still had something unfinished. A silent weight, a damp air lingering on each rotten wall, as if it were still waiting for a new adventure. The house is still alive, still there, challenging and attracting the next curious person. John tries to return to normal life, but the figures in the mirror still refuse to leave him. Every time he looked into the glass, the light reflected from the mirror's surface made him feel like something was watching him from behind. He knew that the images he saw were not hallucinations. It's a sign, a reminder that the house has never let go, and the souls have never truly been freed. Some part of them is still alive, waiting. A week after the expedition, John received a call from a stranger. How could they find him? That question suddenly popped into his head. They call themselves the Guides, a group of individuals searching for unsolved mysteries. They know about the old house, and more importantly, they know about the strange events that John has experienced. "We need you," the stranger said, his voice calm. "That house never ends. It's not a place you can escape once and for all. Everything is still unresolved. And now it's your turn." John felt a shiver run down his spine. He couldn't refuse, couldn't ignore that call. Part of him still yearned to understand the house better. The feeling that someone is watching him has haunted him all these days, and it seems like this is the last time he can solve that mystery. After the conversation, John and a group of members of the Guides returned to the old house. This time, the group are not just curious visitors, but also people trained to deal with supernatural phenomena. Each person in the group has their own mission, and their goal is to solve all the mysteries that haunt the house. When they entered the house, everything was silent. No figure appeared immediately, but the air still smelled musty and was still. Every room, every corner of the house seems to be waiting. John no longer felt the same fear as before, but rather an understanding. He knows that this house is not simply a place to explore, but part of a larger story where souls, memories, and ghosts cannot escape. The team began placing sensors and cameras to record any strange phenomena. They entered each room in turn, looking for any signs of a supernatural presence. Every time they pass by the mirrors, everyone feels a lingering presence, like someone is watching their every step. An hour later, they arrived at the room that John and David had explored last time, where the large mirror was. This is where all the strange events begin. When everyone stood in front of the mirror, they simultaneously noticed a terrifying phenomenon. Their reflections in the mirror began to change, not just faint silhouettes, but clear images, strange faces, and figures not of this world. One of the group members, Maria, begins to feel uneasy. "I can't take it anymore. We need to get out now," she said, shaking her hand and pointing at the reflection in the mirror. "Something wants us to stay." But John couldn't leave. He had found the signs. He knew that the truth had not been fully revealed. This house is not a place to leave. It is a place where stories have not been told, souls have not been released, and a great secret awaits. We must continue, John told the group, determined. John and the group continued to explore the house. They walked through the hallways, through the old rooms, and finally they came to a locked room. This door is not like the other doors, and when they find the key to open it, all they see inside is a strange space, a space that resembles a parallel dimension. That door is the final door, leading to an inexplicable world. Standing before the door, John felt the presence of trapped souls, not one, but thousands. They have not yet been transcended, and they are looking for a way to continue their journey. Entering this space, they realize that the house is the door to another world, where souls are still trapped in chains of memories that never stop. To free them, they must confront their own old memories, what happened in the past, and the secrets the house keeps. When John looked into the mirror again, this time he saw his image as not just a reflection of himself, but a part of those souls. He realized that the house contained more than just shadows, but unresolved parts of each person's soul. When John walked out of the house, he did not feel completely liberated. The figures in the mirror still followed him, a reminder that the house never truly ended. It has opened doors to other worlds, and stories that have never been completed will always be waiting for the next person to enter. The story of John, David, and the guides is not over yet. The spirits in the house are still alive, and the figures in the mirror will always exist, waiting. Who will be the next person to enter the old house? And then the story will continue. Time passed, and that old house, although abandoned, continued to exist in darkness. Those who have entered it, those who have faced its mysteries, have all left, but no one can truly escape it. A strange presence still lingers, waiting for new people, curious people, souls searching for something inexplicable. One day, far from his old house, a man named Daniel was sitting in his room, looking at an old map of the city. He was a researcher of paranormal phenomena, and although he had never heard of that particular house, there was a strange feeling in his heart that made him feel that an adventure was about to begin. Daniel had heard about mysterious stories surrounding the city, stories about the house that people avoided, strange stories that no one dared to tell. He is a man always on the lookout for traces of the paranormal, and it isn't long before he hears rumors about his old home that he begins to find himself drawn into a story that others have overlooked. As dusk fell, Daniel prepared to leave. He had heard that there was an old house, long abandoned, where unsolved secrets still awaited. He carries a camera, the necessary sensors and instruments, all ready to record any strange phenomena he may encounter. Little did he know that he would be the next person to enter the old house, where every story had an open ending, not for those who left, but for those who entered next. The next day, Daniel went to the suburb where the house was located. He didn't know why, but when he saw the house from afar, he felt like something was waiting for him. It stood there, silent and dark, like a portal into another world. The surrounding trees were covered with moss, and the air in the area felt stuffy and heavy, as if everything had stopped moving a long time ago. Daniel walked through the entrance gate. A strange feeling rose in him again. The old house, with its faded walls and broken windows, did not seem to be a dead structure. It was alive, in a way that no one could explain. He gently opened the main door, and as he entered, he heard the floor creak under his feet. The house was once again filled with silence, as if it was waiting for someone to arrive, as if Daniel was destined to discover the secrets it contained. He looked around and began looking for signs of supernatural phenomena, as he always did in his work. But then, just like the others before him, he couldn't deny that something was wrong, a feeling like eyes were watching him from the darkness. As Daniel stepped deeper into the house, a cold wind suddenly blew through. The light from his flashlight penetrated the dark space, illuminating old objects that had been eroded by time. A strange feeling began to take over, and he couldn't deny that there was something in this house that didn't want him to stay long. His every step was echoed by vague footsteps in the vast space, but when he turned around, there was nothing. The shadowy figures he begins to see in the reflection are not his reflections, but ambiguous spirits, silhouettes that may be part of the house or part of an unresolved past. In a small room, he discovered an antique mirror, similar to the one John had encountered when he first arrived. This time, Daniel didn't see just his reflection, but another image. A figure stood quietly in the mirror, no one else but himself, but not him in this world. In the mirror, he saw a different version of himself, as if he were standing between two worlds. But the strangest thing was the whispers and vague sentences appearing in the surrounding space. That voice didn't belong to anyone, but it rang in his head, soft and powerful. "You will not escape," the voice said. "You're the next one in, and you're not leaving." With a mixture of curiosity and fear, Daniel continued to go through each room in the house. He begins to realize that this house not only holds trapped souls, but is also a door between worlds. The figures he saw were not just reflections, but parts of himself, of those who had entered and never left. He tried to find a way out, but every door, every path seemed to lead to identical rooms, making it impossible for him to distinguish which way out. The space in the house becomes distorted, as if it is twisted and no longer follows the normal rules of the world. Once again, in a dark room, Daniel faces himself in the mirror. But this time, it's not just him. In the mirror, souls were staring at him, each face carrying within it untold stories, undiscovered secrets. He realizes that this house is no ordinary place. It is a trap, a place where everyone who enters cannot escape unless they decode the secrets behind the shadowy figures. At this moment, Daniel realizes that he is not just a seeker of mysteries. He is a part of the mystery. It felt like an invisible force was pulling him back, keeping him in this house. The figures, the sounds, the images in the mirror are not trapped souls. They are unresolved parts of the very souls of those who have entered the house. The old house is not a place waiting for liberation, but a place where the souls can never leave. And now, Daniel has become part of the story, part of that loop. The story of the old house never really ends. The souls that have not escaped, the shadowy figures still exist, like a shadow waiting. Even though Daniel has left, the strange presence in that house continues to haunt him. And with each person who crosses that threshold, a new chapter is written, a never-ending cycle. So who will be the next person to enter the old house? The question still hangs, unanswered. But that house is still waiting, always waiting for someone with enough courage, curiosity, or simply those who seek the truth without knowing that they will never be able to escape. The house, with every crack, rotten walls, closed doors, still exists between space and time, like an invitation to those who cannot refuse. And when someone, whether a history enthusiast, a researcher, or simply someone fascinated by mystical stories, decides to step in, they become a part of that story. And then, one day, when everything seemed to calm down, another figure arrived. They walked through the broken door, and the house waited again, as if all along it had been just a scene waiting for the next person. The story never ends. It continues not only in the house, but also in the minds of those caught up in it. And when someone asks, who will be the next person to enter the old house? The old house appeared before their eyes, an abandoned cabin in the middle of a desolate forest, forgotten by time. The wooden walls were faded. The windows had deep cracks, leaving only jagged fragments. John stopped breathing, stared at the house. Is this the place? Daniel gently nodded. A feeling of anxiety appeared in his eyes. This is the place, but I'm not sure what we'll find inside. John felt a strange feeling spread throughout his body. This house feels like a trap, as if everything had been arranged in advance. But he knew to decipher what happened, he had no other choice. Now, amidst the dark night and dense trees, John and Daniel entered the abandoned house, where the dark, unresolved past was waiting for them. The figures in the mirror from the old house suddenly haunted John's mind, as if a series of nightmares had never ended. Part 2: Entrance to the Forgotten House. After a long day of wandering through the woods, I arrived at the cabin and checked the outside. The faded wooden wall, with dark stains and deep cracks, looked like no one had lived there in decades. The window no longer had glass, only jagged fragments remained hanging in the door frame. Only a single hinge remained. The surrounding air was cold and still, as if this place had been forgotten by time. I was tired after the long walk and felt less interested in setting up the tent. I decided to check if the cabin was safe enough to spend the night. Stepping inside, I found a small room with a hammock bed against the wall, a broken chair in the corner, and a small table covered with cobwebs. The smell of damp wood in the air made me shiver. The floor creaked under every step, but the planks still held my weight. When the sun sets, the forest becomes strangely silent. I lit a small lantern, its pale light shining on the dusty walls of the cabin. I told myself I would only stay one night, but the feeling of loneliness lingered. Suddenly, I heard a soft tap, tap sound from outside, like someone was tapping on the wall. At first, I thought it was a branch blowing in the wind, but there was no wind. The tapping continued, steadily like a pattern. I stood up, held a flashlight, and shined into the darkness, but other than the long shadows of the trees, I couldn't see anything. Anxiety began to overwhelm me, but I reminded myself to stay calm. I turned around and took notes in my notebook, trying not to pay attention to the sounds. But then, the knocking sounded again, this time stronger and clearer. I continued to sit there. Cold sweat began to form on my forehead. The noises outside became clearer and clearer. Each time it sounded like someone banging their hand on the wall. But when I looked outside, I couldn't see anyone. I grabbed the hunting knife from my backpack, my palms wet with sweat. Suddenly, a cold chill ran down my spine as I realized something strange. The window that I had locked tightly before going to bed was now slightly ajar. An inexplicable feeling rose within me, and suddenly, a dark shadow passed through the window. It felt like someone was watching me endlessly. I heard scratching on the wall, as if a creature was dragging its claws through the wood. Those sounds repeated over and over, then suddenly fell silent. I couldn't escape the feeling like the house was watching me, as if something was waiting for me to step outside. I decided to check around the cabin again. As I walked around, fresh scratches in the wood along the far wall gave me chills. These scratches do not resemble the claw marks of an animal. They were thin, but clear and purposefully arranged, as if someone had created them on purpose. When I returned to the cabin and closed the door, a wave of panic overtook me. I couldn't understand what those marks meant, and in the darkness, as I climbed into bed and tried to sleep, the sounds outside came again. The deep darkness outside the window seemed to swallow me whole. In the dream, I was still in the cabin, but I felt a presence outside the window. A dark figure, unrecognizable, shook its head and whispered. The sound of knocking on the wall became louder and stronger. I tried to scream but couldn't. When I regained consciousness, I saw the door ajar again, and the broken chair I had been leaning on earlier had now moved. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. New scratches on the wall, unexplainable marks, and especially those noises. I decided to pack my things and leave as soon as the sun set. When I went back to the cabin one last time to double-check everything, I found the door open a little. Even though I firmly closed it, a wave of discomfort washed over me. This time, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm so tired of the mysteries in this house. The feeling of presence, the strange anticipation of the cabin, I cannot explain. I quickly packed up and walked out without looking back. But I know that that old house is still waiting, and its story is not over. The house still stood there, silent like a door leading into another world. A new person will come as I did, and everything will begin again. Who will be the next person to enter that cabin? The tension constantly wrapped around me, and it seemed like it would never let go. I couldn't see anything, but I clearly felt that presence somewhere around me. I can't explain the origin of this feeling, but it makes me uneasy. The collisions and scratches seem to convey some message, a message that I couldn't understand. Every night I spent in that wooden house, a part of me clearly felt an indescribable threat. I left, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something was watching me until I disappeared from its sight. And even now, as I sit in the taxi at 2 a.m., I still remember the sound of that gentle knock in the dark night. I looked in the rearview mirror, saw an empty seat but felt a presence there. My throat tightened, my chest tightened, and my skin felt cold. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, my eyes not daring to leave the empty road, but my mind kept spinning with strange thoughts. Suddenly, I felt like there was a weight on the back seat, even though at first there was nothing. I tried to convince myself that it was just an imagination, but the feeling couldn't be dispelled. That feeling became more and more clear, like someone was whispering next to me, even though I couldn't see their appearance. I continued driving through deserted roads, past old factories and silent gas stations, but that silence made me feel even more frustrated. My mind became hazy, and then I heard my own breathing. My breathing was rapid and my body tensed. But when I looked in the rearview mirror again, the seat behind me was empty. I can't escape those invisible conversations. A small voice rang out, rough and distant, as if coming from somewhere in the dark space around me. "Don't leave," the voice pleaded, and even though I couldn't see anyone, I clearly felt the presence there. Despite my confused thoughts and feelings, I continued driving, trying to ignore it. But the feeling that something was following me didn't go away. Every time I turned the steering wheel, or when I stopped, I heard soft breathing sounds, strange whispers from behind. And suddenly, I couldn't fight the feeling that things might never go back to normal again. Every night, I continued to drive unconsciously, trying to find answers, but that presence always returned. One time, when I stopped at a gas station, I felt someone breathing behind me. Even though there is no one, I cannot deny that that feeling really exists. And then, I realized that the ghosts, the invisible figures that I met in that wooden house, never left me. Strange phenomena that I cannot explain, voices and presences that cannot be seen. They have followed me throughout this life. Now, I can't help but wonder if these things are a part of me, or if they are simply things that I can't explain, that always lurk and haunt me until the very end. Overnight, but the inescapable feeling continued to haunt me. That whole day, I couldn't forget the strange marks in the warehouse, the symbols and candle circles I had found. Each whisper echoed in my head, as if it never left, and I couldn't stop thinking about the metal door, the small space, and the marks I had seen. When my boss arrived, I told him everything from the strange noises to the faint footprints and scary symbols I had discovered. He looked at me, his eyes filled with suspicion, but when he saw me shaking and confused, he couldn't help but believe that something was wrong. Although he couldn't explain clearly, he promised to call more people to check. But as soon as he left, I felt something in the air again. Even though I left the warehouse, the feeling of that presence still couldn't escape my mind. I couldn't help but wonder if everything was just my hallucination. But after what I'd been through, I couldn't easily deny the strange feelings I was experiencing. After my work ended, I decided to go home. As I drove through the deserted industrial area, the strange feeling came back, as if I had never left that place. Every flashing light, every flickering darkness along the road, reminded me of what happened in the dark night of the warehouse. It feels like something is still watching me, from that deep darkness, never letting go. When I got home, I didn't dare sit still by myself. The lights couldn't dispel the darkness in my mind, and I knew that the things I found in the warehouse wouldn't leave me easily. The whispers, the symbols, and the circle of candles still haunt me, and I know that this story is not over. There really is something left unexplained, and I can't help but think that there may be further encounters, more terrifying discoveries awaiting. The following nights, the feeling of anxiety and fear never let me go. I tried to convince myself that it was just a malfunction of the elevator system, a trick of the mind. But every time I step into the elevator, I feel that something is not right. Unfamiliar hallways, locked doors, and strange shapes that always appeared from the darkness made me uneasy. Every time I step into an elevator, I find myself passing floors I have never seen before. Flickering lights, rustling sounds from the quiet hallways, and distant tapping sounds only increased my sense of frustration. Sometimes I hear heavy breathing from blurry figures, creatures with strange eyes or no eyes, just looking at me in silence, waiting. I tried everything to avoid it, but every night, the strange experiences repeated themselves. Elevators always take me to places I don't recognize, into empty hallways, dark rooms, and sometimes I can't find my way out. It felt like a never-ending nightmare, a loop that I couldn't escape. I tried to seek help from my colleagues, but they only said that the elevator and building had been checked periodically and there was nothing unusual. Still, I couldn't shake that strange feeling. Every time the elevator stopped at a floor I didn't recognize, I felt a sense of fear rising inside me, as if I were lost in another world, a world I couldn't understand. And then, one night, when I returned to the office to finish some late work, I encountered inexplicable symptoms. The elevator stopped at unclear floors, shadowy figures, and strange knocking sounds from behind made it impossible for me to ignore. I began to realize that maybe I wasn't simply dealing with a technical error anymore, but that perhaps there was something else lurking in this building. Every time I leave the building, I feel like I'm escaping a nightmare. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing strange, just my imagination. But there's one thing I can't erase: the feeling that the things I saw and heard those nights weren't the product of a tired mind. The silhouettes, the breathing sounds, the knocking sounds, they were too real to be just hallucinations. And I can't help but wonder, can I really escape this place, or have I become a part of it? Flashlight and shining light on the crack, I saw that the floor was not only cracked, but also had a deep indentation, like a hole. I reached down, careful not to break the surrounding tiles. My sense of insecurity became even more pronounced, but a strange force forced me to continue. As I approached closer, I noticed a small, wooden door hidden beneath the old floor. It's not like any doors I've ever seen. It was old, decrepit, and looked like it had been neglected over the years. I couldn't resist my curiosity, and I decided to try opening it. My hands trembled as I grabbed the handle, pulling slowly. The squeaking sound that came out made me shiver. After opening the door, I saw a small staircase leading down into the darkness. There was no light, only cold and still air. Strangely, I felt a strange suction from down there, as if something wanted me to get down. In just a moment, a cold wind blew from downstairs, carrying with it a musty and old smell. The vague feeling of an inexplicable presence stopped me in my tracks. Unspoken questions still hung in my mind. How could I have been drawn into a place like this, where there was no sign of life, only a heavy silence and a feeling of not belonging? I took a step back and suddenly heard a small, gentle sound, like something was stirring from the bottom of the stairs. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn around without knowing what was lurking down there. Part of me, the practical and rational part, said I should leave immediately. But the other part of me, a strange part, urged me forward. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and walked down the stairs. Every step makes me feel more uncertain about where I'm going. The space around me seemed to become colder, more cramped, and all I could hear were my footsteps, echoing in the silence. But a strange feeling began to creep inside me again. I wasn't just hearing my own footsteps. I stopped for a moment and listened. Just for a short second, I heard a very light noise, like someone was moving, right behind me. That feeling made me unable to stand still any longer. My breathing was rapid and my throat felt tight. I turned around, but there was no one there. I looked down, where there was only impenetrable darkness. And then, I realized that I couldn't go back anymore. The door slammed shut behind me, and I knew that I had entered a world from which there was no exit. That this is just fatigue and stress after a long day. However, the strange feeling still kept spinning in my head. The dim lighting of the hallway made everything seem hazy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every step I took on the old floor, I felt like someone was watching me. I returned to my room, trying to get used to the new space, but the atmosphere seemed heavy and full of frustration. I sat down on the hard bed and looked around, trying to get used to everything. I couldn't understand why, but I felt like I wasn't really alone. Every little sound, like the wind blowing through the window, the gentle footsteps in the hallway, makes me feel restless. I decided to take a bath to relieve the stress in my body. Entering the bathroom, I looked in the mirror and saw that I looked much more tired than the day before. My skin was pale, and signs of fatigue were evident on my face. I tried to erase the anxiety in my heart, but my eyes were drawn to the faint stains on the walls. There seems to be nothing new in this place. Everything is old, full of cracks, and filled with the feeling that time has forgotten it. When I left the bathroom, the hallway lights were still dim, and again, I heard strange sounds coming from the end of the hallway. The music sounded softly from somewhere, then suddenly stopped, making me shiver. I didn't dare leave the room anymore. I just stood there, trying to listen and look for any signs of something that wasn't normal. Part of me wanted to ignore this feeling, but another part couldn't stop thinking about the strange events that had happened before. The sound of footsteps in the hallway, the inexplicable feeling of haunting was still there, deep in my heart, even though I had left the Colonial Hotel. The whispers still echo in my mind, like a part of the past that I cannot completely forget. That old embroidered bag, with its faded threads and strange letters, is still like a mysterious piece, inexplicable, impossible to ignore. Maybe it's more than just a forgotten item. Maybe it is part of long memories, of an unfinished story, of departed lives, and of a forgotten home. Every time I thought about that room, about the strange sounds and images, I felt a strange sense of fear in my chest, but also some relief, as if I had done the right thing, even if only a very small part of what had happened. When I left the hotel, I couldn't tell whether I had actually found the truth or not, but I knew that that strange feeling, although it may have been my mind's imagination, remained with me. Like part of an untold story, the whispers still follow me in my dreams, in my quiet moments, and in my lonely nights. And if anyone asked me about the strangest place I've ever been, I would just talk about room 14 in the Colonial Hotel, where whispers rang out like flashbacks from the past, where I found an old embroidered bag, and where I felt an inexplicable presence. It's a story I will never forget, whether I like it or not. Strange marks on the wall, and also the feeling of something waiting for me in the dark. I couldn't explain why I had this feeling, but it followed me all night, not giving me any peace. With each passing minute, I felt more and more like I was stuck in a vortex with no way out, where everything became vague and confusing. I can't be sure what will happen next, but the only thing I know is that this insecurity shows no signs of stopping. So today's story has ended. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you find the story interesting, don't forget to leave it like, comment my feelings, and share, let your friends listen. And most importantly, please register channel to look forward to the next scary stories. See you again in the following stories. Wishing you a peaceful night.